Good morning. Today is Wednesday, April the 10th. This is our regularly scheduled meeting for the Collection Service Board. My name is Roxana Gamusio. I'm the Executive Director with the board. And as we get started, the first thing I'd like to do is take roll call to make sure that we have quorum. Members, thank you for being here. I will go ahead and read your name. If you can make sure to read into the mic that you're here, we will proceed. Mr. Chip Hellman.
Present.
Thank you. Greg Swirsky. Greg is not with us here today. Tony Zikovich
Present.
and Jason Hill.
Present.
Thank you. And Lori is also not here, but we do have quorum in order to proceed. The first item that I would like to go over is the notice of the meeting. This notice for the April 10th, 2024 meeting was posted on the website, and the date was properly notified as of July 14th of 2023. Separately, this month's agenda was posted on April the 3rd, so proper notice has been provided. Also, for anyone that is participating through Teams or here in the meeting at the end with new business, we'll make sure to give them an opportunity to ask any questions or anything they have to say regarding the agenda or the meeting. First order of business would be to review the agenda that is on your iPads. It was also emailed to the members previously. If you have nothing that needs to be amended, I would need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you.
I second.
Motion by Chip and seconded by Jason. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That takes care of our agenda. Minutes for this January meeting were also sent via email to all of our members. If there are any changes, please let me know. They're also on your iPads for you to review. And if we don't have any amendments, then I would need a motion to accept the January minutes as presented.
So moved.
With a motion by Chip, do we have a second?
I second.
And a second by Jason. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Members, we will go ahead and do our director's report, and that starts on your iPads. As I scroll, pardon me, on page 17, you have before you the information for our financials. This report is as of February of 2024. It shows the program with a deficit of $56,560. It leaves our reserves at $858,162. This year, we will end up with a deficit. We need to be, if we are in the deficit for 2 years in a row, we would go before a self-sufficiency hearing and kind of answer all the questions and debate what is it that we do. I think at this time, as we've discussed before, it's a trend that we're seeing across the country. I'm not foreseeing addressing the fees anytime soon, but it's just something that we need to keep in mind in case we do need to do that next year.
Continue to have consolidation in the industry, right?
Right, that's what we're seeing, yeah. Yeah, we welcome any thoughts, ideas that, you have, but I think at this point, it's just a trend of the industry. And so we're going to kind of wait a bit and see how that goes. I will go ahead and turn it over to Joe for our legal report and mute myself. Thank you.
Good morning, board members. I believe Roxana supplied you with the legal report approximately a week ago. There are a total of 23 cases on the report. 4 of those cases are represented based off of new information. I'll open the floor to you all if you have any questions or would like to discuss any of the complaints.
Can you remind me, in the state of Tennessee, are we, as it relates to litigation, I'm looking specifically at number 16 here. Are we an assignment state or a non-assignment state? In a civil case for collection of a debt, it's the style of the case in the name of the original creditor, or is it in the name of the collection agency?
So the debt in this case was still being held by the original creditor, and then the collection service was operating as the third party. So they had not purchased or taken over the account via assignment. So they were operating as essentially a servicer, if that answers your question in this case.
So I'm broadening it to a more just an industry question, I suppose. But I do think it gets to this complaint gets a little bit in the middle of the question, because they talk about the process server making false representations. So back in the day, this was a non-assignment state. So when I had my company here, when we filed suit, the suit was actually for the hospital against the consumer. Our name was on it, but the actual style of the case was ABC Hospital versus John Doe. Then I know we did some lobbying years ago trying to convert it over to an assignment state. The advantages there would then be, there's some disadvantages, but the suit could be filed in our name, DEF Collection Company versus, but we could combine debts into one litigation for the same date. Incident of service. So hospital, doctor bills, radiologists, you could put them all. It's actually better for the consumer. They could show up one time, have one set of court costs. And I really honestly don't recall if we ever got that passed. And then I sort of left the industry for a period of time, came back, but working with companies out of the state. And so I really haven't paid attention to whether or not we're truly an assignment state or a non-assignment state.
So I have seen litigation brought on behalf of the listed debt collector. So it wouldn't have to be listed in the instance of like a medical creditor. It wouldn't have to be listed in the hospital's name. The collection service, if they've taken over the account, could list themselves as the plaintiff in the civil action. As far as combining accounts to basically group things, I do not believe that's the case, but I would have to research that before I made a full-blown assertion. But I do know for a fact that collection services can litigate within their own name as the plaintiff.
Okay. Even if they didn't buy the debt, just as the servicer of the debt.
I believe as long as the document that assigned them to the account gives them that legal, it basically states that, hey, as part of the assignment, we are granting you the ability to move forward legally with that. As long as that is articulated in the document of assignment, the collection service would then be able to do it without formally taking over the account. It would be like a right granted via document.
Okay. Could I ask you, this is not either urgent or I consider it to be important, but not urgent, not time sensitive. But when you have a break in the action, could you sort of track that down?
Absolutely.
I actually received a phone call week before last from someone in the industry who asked me that question specifically. And I said, I don't really know how that ended up, because while we were sort of working I'm talking 24 years ago now, to try to get that change made, then I had, or 26 years, I had sold my company and kind of walked away from that whole lobbying activity. So I don't really know where it ended up.
Absolutely. I'll research that issue and then I'll provide a report to you all that summarizes that exactly where it stands at this point in time with the
That's
industry.
great.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
I don't have any other questions about the legal report. Do either of you gentlemen want to ask any questions?
Other than we've seen a lot of consent orders issued on this report. I think it's the most I've ever seen. What trend are you seeing? recently. More aggressive collection efforts, I guess. I don't know how to equate that with anything, but you're just seeing there's many, I mean, it's a big report, but there's a lot of consent orders on this report.
What I'm seeing is just trying to stay in the bounds. What I'm seeing is similar or the same entities repeating behaviors across different individual accounts, but in the same mythology. So it's like if a company is operating in a certain way and it's the same entity over and over again, that would kind of push the hand towards formal discipline as to a letter of warning, because it seems to be a practice, if that makes sense. I don't want to give anything away as far as entities, but does that make sense?
Yeah, like case number 5. I mean, this company or individual has had a bunch of warnings, as you can see. So repeat offender, I guess. Gotcha. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And just to add, and then of course, Joe is really good about being consistent. We want to recommend the same thing every time. So if we're seeing more, then we'll be consistent. On the financial report, we had 2 cases solve and pay the civil penalty. That's also doesn't occur every time that we're seeing it. It's not what we want to see, but if they're repeating the same violations, then it's something to look at.
I think I would add just more of a subjective comment back to what we said about consolidation. If you think about what's happening as companies consolidate, there'll be fewer names of companies in the marketplace, but the volume of communications with consumers won't change. And so you probably see more patterns and more sort of repeat offenders by nature. It's good to handle them.
And on a related note, there were several instances where on a previous legal report, we had recommended a course of action, and then the company or entity had, shut its doors since. So that kind of slows things down when you're trying to, communicate with an out-of-state entity or something like that that is no longer in operation. So I will say that coincides with the fact of, companies coming together and there being less individual organizations as opposed to, conglomerates taking over accounts.
And do companies who are considering just closing contact the board? Or
We would hope that they would. I mean, that is certainly the standard of practice that, we would recommend to any companies. I will say, and just the ones that I've come across, and granted, I've started here in October, the ones I've come across, we were not informed beforehand.
I see. Okay.
Is the consolidation, as you mentioned, of all these companies, the reason for the reduction in revenue on our end?
Yes,
Less
we've
companies
seen,
paying the fees.
absolutely.
Wow,
Right.
that's a,
And often, and Bob handles the renewals, as you know, but often with the renewal, that'll trigger it, right? Because we'll mail the renewal automatically when it's time to renew. And that's when they'll say, oh, we've stopped, we're no longer, we've sold, we've changed what we're
Yeah.
doing. And so that's what we're seeing. Definitely a reduction in our licensing pool because of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's certainly a topic of conversation in the industry everywhere I go. People, of course, there's a lot of buying and selling
Mhm.
going on right now, but then others, they just can't compete. I don't know, we should probably get back to the agenda, but this move to digital communication is a costly one. And so companies of a certain size don't really have the internal expertise nor the capital to convert over to text, emails, as well as telephone calls and mail. And so some companies are just stopping and saying, I don't want to put that money in, or I can't. And so short of doing a quick sale, the best move for me is to leave, just shut her down. And that's really what's happening. So. So the next move, do we need the motion to approve the legal report? And then once we have the motion and second on the table, then we read it in, or do we read it in first?
We eat whatever you would prefer.
Let's read it in first.
Okay.
That's a great
And you just mean the case number, correct?
Yes.
That sounds perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
And just to verify, you all are accepting all the recommendations before I read, okay. Okay. Alrighty, so do I have to say, like, if accept the recommendation?
Or just the case. number.
Okay. Okay.
The formal motion.
Okay. Case number 202-305-9451. Case number 202-306-0131.
What-
202.
Can we stop for just a second? Did I miss something? What, are you reading from beginning with number one, or are you going?
Yes.
Start with page 20. Start with page 20 on your iPad. You may be looking at
The
the,
agenda has the last legal report on it
Yes.
too.
Okay.
yes, your minutes will have what we approved last time. That always is confusing. I get it. Yeah.
That would be a very bad start for me. I
Yeah.
apologize.
Well, so I asked my question about last time's.
When I looked at 16, I made that assumption, but I just wanted to make sure.
Okay,
Okay.
you can continue.
Okay. Number 3, 202-306-2611. Number 4, 202-306-0731. 5, 202-306-2751. 6, 202-306-4451. 7, 202-306-3541. 8, 202-4000911. 9, 202-4000261. 10, 202-303-5071. 11, 202-306-2691. 12, 202-306-4081. 13, 202-400-3141. 14, 202-400-3031. 15, 202-400-7781. 16, 202-400-9491. 17, 202-401-0341. 18, 202-400-4421. 19, 202-400-4841. 20, 202-305-8501. 21, 202-305-3691. 22, 202-303-2791. 23, 202-305-6311. That's it.
Uh, Just a quick question. It seemed like there were several on here that I haven't noticed before. A referral from State of Tennessee Division of Consumer Affairs. Did they open a new call center or something? Or is this,
It just seems to be a trend where the complainants have found that website or that portal before us and then file
Okay.
it with them, and then Consumer Affairs will evaluate it. And if it's a licensee that they think falls within our jurisdiction, they'll just send it on over.
okay. Sure. Interesting. I move that we accept the legal report and the recommendations contained therein.
I'm sorry. And I second. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We have a motion by Chip and a second by Jason. All those in agreement to accept the legal report as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, thank you. That takes care of the legal report. Before, and Joe is going to continue, but before we leave this, and it leaves my train of thought, I want us to think about, maybe at the next meeting or sometime soon, we address, could we move some of the complaints through an agreed citation process? I know that Glenn at some point had addressed that and we thought about it. I just think the complaints have some similarities as we're seeing now, but they're not all identical. And so if we moved in that direction, we would create that set of, what the complaint has to meet in order for legal counsel and I to possibly review it and move it and go with the same recommendation we normally have and close it before the board actually meets. It would move some of these complaints faster, and then your time would focus on the complaints that are unique and different.
I would be totally in favor of that.
Okay.
I suggest you all draft
We
something
will.
that we could consider maybe next time.
Perfect.
That'd be great.
Perfect. And we do that on several, at least one of our big programs that we have. It does, again, it would have to be those parameters that you agree, but we're seeing that consistency. Back to everybody's point, I think it's well worth addressing again.
Yes.
And what that would look like is those complaints that meet it exactly. Joe would look at them, review them, they meet it. We send out the order already and we close it.
Yes,
and it
you
just
don't
follows that.
need us
You
for
don't.
that.
Correct. So that's what we'll do.
Okay,
Thank you.
great idea.
Now I would just like to touch base with you all on a proposal to rule amendments and changes to our rules as a board. I believe at the end of last year, we all met together and we discussed the retrospective review that the department went through with all of our board rules, where we looked and basically wanted to update our rules en masse for all of our programs. For instance, delete rules that conflict with laws that have been passed since those rules were written, or superfluous language within rules. Specifically looking at the collection service rules, I've proposed changes that come directly from that retrospective review where we evaluated those rules. I'm going to briefly touch on and summarize the changes to the rules that I have drafted. And then I would ask you all, after we discuss and summarize the rules, to grant authority so that our next board meeting on July 10th, we would have a rulemaking hearing. You would formally review these rules. I would formally present them to you with the language and copies. And then you all would be able to accept or, recommend changes to those rules. And that would just bring our collection service rules up to date. And we would have implemented the changes that we believe are appropriate from the retrospective review. So any questions on just the process of that? And then I can go through the summary of the changes of rules that we're recommending, but it's nothing substantive, no major changes, just really kind of cleaning up and bookkeeping of the rules already in place.
I don't have any questions about the process.
Just quickly, to summarize the changes that were generated from the retrospective review, Rule 0320-01-.01, which is qualification of applicants, contact with character references, which would be 1D, is being removed. We do not require character references as far as individuals go. Our licensees are corporations as opposed to individuals. So that language is much more reflective of a board where individuals are applying for licensure. In that same vein, Rule 0320-01-0.01 qualification of applicants, we're also removing paragraphs 4, 5, and 6. All those paragraphs deal, once again, with individual military applicants and exceptions to the general licensing rules for them. Again, our licensees are not individuals, so that language is being removed from the rule because it does not apply to our licensees who are businesses. 0320-01.04 is change of ownership. We've changed the language regarding the definition of change of ownership for corporations and LLCs, just to try to clean it up and to make it a little more clear what defines a change of ownership. So we've looked at changing the language from the definition of a change of ownership for an LLC or a corporation from an aggregate change of 50% or more of the shares ownership or other member interests respectively, to any change that results in a different person or entity acquiring an aggregate of 50% or more of the shares ownership and other member interests respectively. An example here would be if a corporation or LLC, let's just say for instance, has 100% of the ownership interest of a collection service business, and then essentially within they transfer 25% of their interest to this individual, 25% to that. The same LLC holds 50% in the decision-making authority over the licensee, but underneath the current, letter of the rule, they would need to report a quote unquote change of ownership because 25% has gone here and 25% has gone there, which would be aggregate of 50, but there's no substantive change. So what we've done by changing the language is, hey, if the entity that holds 50% or more of the corporation, that changes and that would be defined as a change of ownership. And that would eliminate having to report changes that really have no material outcome as to the decision-making of the collection service business. 0320-05.05 deals with false or misleading representations. As part of organization, we're proposing a relocation of the prohibitive practices that are currently listed in another section by themselves. The section that they're currently listed in is 0320-02.02, and they just stand alone. So there's essentially a rule that just deals with prohibitive practices, but our standards of practice and false and misleading representations, unfair practices, they're all listed somewhere else. So these were kind of like standalone. The change that we're recommending here is that we just relist the same prohibitive practices with all the other violations underneath the rule, as opposed to keeping them just out on their own. It kind of pulls everything into uniformity. So that's just simply a relocation. The language isn't changing at all regarding the prohibitive practices. And then Rule 0320-05-.10 is administrative enforcement. And that rule had previously referenced the Tennessee Collection Service Act, which is the act that we are enforcing with our rules. And essentially the language stated that if there's a violation found of our rules, it's also a violation of the Tennessee Collection Service Act. Well, of course it is, because our rules are promulgated from the act itself. What we're changing here is more the intention behind the original rules. And instead of citing the Tennessee Collection Service Act, we're citing the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, which was the intent behind the rule. Hey, if you violated our Collection Services Act, this would also be a violation of the FDCPA. So I have cited that correct statute in that paragraph. So that would be the change there. And then the final changes are Rule 0320-01.02, examinations. It's a blank rule. It just has a title, says examinations, and then has a paragraph of authority. So we're just going to remove that section since there is no examinations for our licensees. And then finally, as I mentioned, there is a section 0320-02.03 .02 that just has prohibitive practices listed by themselves. Since we're moving them into the other rule, we would be repealing the current prohibitive practices rule since there would no longer be needed because that language has been moved elsewhere. I know that's a lot, but I will present it all to you in detail. I just wanted to touch over so you guys see the big picture of what's going on, give you a chance to ask any questions. And then finally, if you all do believe it's appropriate, grant authority so that we could set a rulemaking hearing at our next board meeting in July, and then formally move forward with these rules and present them to you all as a board.
What happens after these changes are approved by us? Is there another step at the state government level?
Absolutely. So we would have to submit them to the commissioner of the department first, get his signature. Then they are also reviewed by the Attorney General's office, and they would have to get the signature of the Attorney General's office. And then finally, they also go to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State would review them, and then the Secretary of State himself would have to sign the rulemaking package for it to move forward and be officially adopted and go into practice.
Okay. Then I guess the real discussion happens next time.
Correct.
Just a quick question about the change of ownership. What are we trying to accomplish?
I think we're just trying to make it more clear what defines a change of ownership. We've had licensees where percentages have swapped, but the decision-making authority has stayed the same. So essentially, they've had to report a change of ownership.
Right.
That in all practicality, there wasn't a change of decision-making authority. So the thought was, hey, let's clear this up. And it was just a suggestion.
Yeah, and I like it because I certainly have, when I owned my agency here, I had stock grants given to people. Every time we did something, we had to notify the board, even though it may have represented 8% or 10%, so forth. So I understand what we're trying to do here. My question though is, what is it the board wants to know about ownership? Who's in control? I think that's what you sort of alluded to. This board needs to know, or you guys need to know who's actually running who has control over the decisions. If you have 51%, ultimately it doesn't matter what the manager says or what anyone else says. You have the ability to make changes. That's all you really care about, right?
Well, we care about it from the aspect that to become a licensee, we do such an extensive background search, financial analysis, and everything like that, so that we would want to make sure that our review of the licensee and the owner of the licensee is still on par to where if it were to change, the dominating percentage of a company were to go to a different entity, well, that does need to be reported, and then we would need to evaluate their qualifications as far as the licensee and running that collection service. So the thought process is kind of, the barrier to become a licensee to begin with and to make sure everything falls into conformity with that.
Okay, so said another way, and I'm not going to belabor this. I'm in favor of it, by the way, but of this particular change. But said another way is you really don't care if I bought. Forget that I'm on this board, but if I was a member of the industry and I went and bought a 25% ownership in a company in Knoxville, one in Memphis, and one here in Nashville, you really don't even care. It's because it really doesn't matter to you, because whoever's running those businesses maintain the 50% threshold.
As long as exactly. So as long as essentially, for lack of a better term, the decision maker remains the same, then as far as the board goes, we're all on the same page. There's no really need for an update. But if at any point in time that power dynamic changes, as you articulated, then yes. So we're not worried about people getting small percentages of corporations if it doesn't grant them authority.
Would it matter to you if I was a convicted felon? Maybe this isn't.
I believe, yes, that would be a material term that would.
But you wouldn't know about it.
Well, and I'm sorry, but with the renewal process, right, on the initial question, application, the question's there, and in the renewal it is as well. Have you, or I think it's anyone associated with the company, been convicted of a felony within the last 5 years? And I don't have it in front of me to quote, but the question's there. So
Okay,
whoever's doing the renewal and then attesting that they're being truthful would be lying if they sold 25% and you were a felon.
okay. Well, the reason, because I think in the original language, it was the thought that when we had even a small change of ownership, then the board had an opportunity to sort of vet the collection service board.
Right.
Had opportunity to sort of have their eyes on it and check key things.
Absolutely, yeah. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
The way, just for clarity, the current rule on the book states that in a corporation or limited liability company, an aggregate change of 50% or more. So they were still looking at the 50% number, but in the example that I gave, if an entity holds 100% and then they send 25 here, 25 there, the people that have now gotten 25% shares respectively, they would have to basically report that as a change in ownership. But again, the decision maker is still the same. So
Okay,
if they weren't hitting that 50% threshold underneath the existing rule, it would essentially be the same because we only required that they report an aggregate of a 50% change.
got it. Okay. And I think the key is that at renewal,
Correct.
that's good.
Correct.
It would be caught there
Right.
if the applicant's being truthful.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
That is all I had.
Oh, yeah,
Thank
no
you.
problem, sir.
That's
Thank
good.
you.
We need a motion. So we would need a motion for Joe to proceed, and what will happen at the July meeting is we will do the full rulemaking hearing, make sure it's noticed. As soon as we've got that draft language written out before the meeting, you all will have it as well, and it would be on your iPads. That way, anyone that from the industry that wants to send a written notice ahead of time and some opinions or thoughts or concerns, they would have plenty of time to reach us as well as during the meeting.
I move, we ask Joe to proceed.
I second that.
Thank you. We have a motion by Chip and a second by Tony to proceed. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. Thank you. That takes care of our proposed rules. So we will definitely move forward with that. Under new business, the only item I have that I did add to our agenda, not our agenda, I apologize, to the iPad documents, is just a quick update on the NACARA conference for 2024. It's the conference and training in Sacramento, California for executive, for directors, board members have a session, just like the last time that they were here in Nashville. We were able to take advantage of them being local and it not, we sponsored it. The board was very generous and bought some beautiful things. And so this particular conference, mostly due to the financial situation, I won't be traveling and going, but I do want the board members to be aware just in case for some reason there's a topic that is of vital interest. We can always at the July meeting vote for one of you to attend. But at this point, I definitely wanted everyone to know where it was going to be held and the dates. And it is September the 30th through October the 2nd in Sacramento.
Okay.
So that's just informational. I don't have anything else. I want to make sure that we don't have anyone participating in person. But Dana, if you've got anybody on Teams with a hand raised that maybe we can't see, although we're able to see the 4 members participating, please let us know so they have a chance to ask any questions or any concerns regarding the agenda.
There's no one on here.
Thank you, Dana. So hearing none, I have nothing else. I'll turn it over to our chair, Chip, or board members if you have anything. If not,
Do you guys have anything? Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
And I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
thank you. That concludes our meeting. Thank you very much, members.